Oh, what a mess. This is Neil Schneider from Meant to Be Seen. Welcome back to my messy basement. Now, in our last episode, I talked about my enthusiasm for the latest generation of surround sound systems, in particular Dolby Atmos and DTS:X, really immersive experiences. I also talked about how, if you are interested in 4K displays, and they are readily available, in my experience, there's actually very little 4K content out there. And the reason why these two topics are so important is because, which is often the case, the premium audio experiences, so Dolby Atmos and DTS:X, are often limited, or I shouldn't say often, but are sometimes limited to 4K content. And if you want examples of that, please go to the previous episode. I went into great detail on how this came to be. The other challenge is, even if you have access to 4K, the compatibility of the audio, so of these different audio systems, is inconsistent. You could get all kinds of devices that are 4K compliant. You can also get surround sound systems which are compatible with Dolby Atmos and DTS:X. However, you can still be prone to inconsistent results from one service to the next as to which will give you that full premium experience. There are no guarantees. So call it some self-discovery, but I see the solution as being a PC-based media center. One solution to cover everything, if not everything possible. And my goals in building this media center solution was, I want to make sure that, of course, PC is the heart of the media experience. So that includes video games, that includes entertainment, anything that I want on display or projected to my screen, virtual reality, and so on. I want it running through my PC. It was very important that I get more out of my existing 1080p display. So I have a Panasonic AE7000 1080p projector. I've been really happy with it. It would be great if I could take these premium experiences, both audio and video, and play them on what I already have instead of having to buy brand new equipment. I want to get Dolby Atmos and DTS:X running on everything possible. Okay, I think it's a challenge that there are inconsistent results from one solution to the next. So I very much want to see everything running properly out of my PC. And ultimately, I'd like to save some money. Okay, I really want to get those premium experiences without having to spend the premium dollars. So what I decided now, I have been able to answer most of these goals. Okay. But the solution takes a few episodes. So the last episode was an introduction to this conundrum. And today I'm going to focus on how to make it possible to take 4K content, be it video games or traditional entertainment, and play them on your 1080p displays. Okay? Now, why is this important? Why, who cares, right? Why would you want to play existing 4K content on a lower resolution 1080p display? Well, my experience is that when you do this, even though it's a lower resolution, it actually looks better. Okay, so if there is 4K content out there that you could play and watch, by all means, there's no disadvantage to doing it on a 1080p display. But in order to make that possible, your display has to be recognized as a 4K display. Otherwise, the content will say, that's not compatible with what my content's designed for. So we got to get around that problem. If you have a projector, and a byproduct of at least one of these solutions is that you could save some projector bulb life. Okay, and anyone who owns a projector knows that projector bulbs, if you've got a really good projector, are expensive to replace, and it's good to save some of that bulb life. So we have a solution there too, which was a byproduct of making this all work for you tonight. So I'm going to be back with much more right after this. What we're going to do is we're going to take 4K source material and downscale it to 1080p. This is a form of super sampling. Okay, super sampling is a type of anti-aliasing, and what it does is it lets us see the finer details. Okay, because when we're having 4K material downscale to 1080p, we have more source data to work with. Okay, so even though there's fewer pixels actually being displayed, there's more information to to source from. Okay, so that's why it's possible to see some of the finer details. The other benefit, which ties in more to super sampling or anti-aliasing, is because we have more pixels to start with and we're downscaling, things will look smoother. There will be fewer jagged edges. Now, something to be absolutely clear, this is not going to add additional resolution to your display, like additional physical resolution. So we're not going to suddenly have 4K televisions or 4K projectors. We're just getting more out of what we already have. Now, the first method, which is something most of my viewers will be able to do right out of the box, is to get the graphics card to do all the work. Now, this is best for video games, and when I say best, I'm saying that so that there's a margin of error there. Okay. Both AMD and Nvidia graphics cards support this technique. It will not work with services like Netflix or streaming services, and I'll explain why a little bit later. So again, this is mostly beneficial for video games. If you already have super sampling or anti-aliasing features turned on, you may have mixed results. Okay, you might see some finer details. You're going to have to experiment for yourself. For me, I noticed a difference, so I've been maintaining this downscaling technique. So let's talk about AMD first. Very easy. Again, we're downscaling 4K to 1080p strictly from the graphics card. What you do, you open up the AMD Catalyst display driver, you activate the virtual super resolution. So I've got it on screen and circled so you can see for yourself. Now what you can do is, you can actually scale your Windows desktop. The way to do that is on the desktop, you right click, you choose display settings, and then you're going to see resolutions that were previously not there before. You're going to see resolutions that go higher than what your display is normally capable of. So in this case, you're going to choose 3,840 pixels by 2160 or 2,160 pixels. And what will happen from that point forward is your Windows display is going to be sending 4K to and downscaling it before it gets to your display. But to actually activate it in your video games, you choose display settings, and again, you're going to see resolution options that weren't previously there. You choose 3,840 pixels by 2160, and you're good to go. NVIDIA is very similar. Okay. What you do is you get into the NVIDIA control panel, you select change resolution. On that change resolution window, you press the customize button. Then you tick, there's a selection there to select called enable resolutions not exposed by the display. So what this means is that it's going to list resolutions that NVIDIA knows the display isn't physically capable of. And then you're going to choose create custom resolution. A window is going to appear. It's a little overwhelming at first, but really the only setting you need to concern yourself with is the resolution. You're going to populate it with 3,840 by 2,160 pixels. My advice is that there's a refresh rate listing there. My advice is to set it to 60 Hertz, no more, no less. I suppose if your display is capable of a higher refresh rate, I mean, you could experiment, but my advice, stick with the standard 3840 by 2160 by 60 hertz. And then again, so that you're good to go. If you want, for the Windows desktop, as we did with the AMD card, right-click, choose Display Settings, then select the higher resolution. So 3840 by 2160. So you're taking 4K source material, in this case your Windows desktop, and you're having it downscaled. Now, and again, for video games, you choose the higher resolution, 3840 by 2160, and then your video game will be outputting 4K. Your graphics card will downscale it to something your 1080 display will understand. Now, things to be aware of, because we're asking the graphics card to work harder, okay, there will be a performance cost. So, you know, it's helpful to have higher performing graphics hardware in this case. I'm blessed with, on the Nvidia side, that I'm running on a AVGA GTX 2080 super graphics card, okay? And I have an AMD XFX 390X for the AMD side of things. So, but all the same, be prepared to have a beefier graphics card if you're asking it to do full 4K resolution. Now, something that will also be helpful is in your display settings, in your Windows display settings, there's an option to scale, okay? If your display is like mine, things may look a bit squishy and a little harder to read because of the downscaling. So what you do is, my advice is to set the scaling to 300%, and everything will be nice and crystal clear. Now, that being said, okay, this is an out-of-the-box solution. You don't need any extra hardware, and you know it will work with most graphics cards out there. In my opinion, there's a better way still, okay? Especially if we're looking at services like Netflix and streaming services, anything above and beyond video games, this will be helpful for. So I'll be back with more right after this. In my last segment, I talked about how, especially for video games, you could easily get your graphics card to downscale 4K content to 1080p, all right, to something that your, a projector or a monitor or an HDTV will understand, and you're good to go out of the box. Unfortunately, this technique won't work for streaming services like Netflix and certain other products out there. And let me explain why. So all our displays, so our monitors, our projectors, our HDTVs, like pretty much everything all our displays, they have something called an EDID. So EDID stands for Extended Display Identification Data. And what this does is it tells the peripheral, so let's say if I connect a peripheral to my display, like a computer, for example, it tells my computer what resolution my display is capable of, its refresh rate, which color spaces it supports, like high dynamic range or standard dynamic range color spaces, and other features that may be important as well. So even though my graphics card is fully capable of rendering 4K and downscaling it, okay, the display is still seen as a 1080p display. So streaming services like Netflix, they're not going to treat my PC as a 4K capable device. They're only going to see it as a 1080p device. And some apps may test, I'm not just talking about Netflix, other applications may be testing that EDID no matter what. So the solution is what we call an HDMI downscaler. Okay, so we need hardware that's going to tell the computer or the peripheral, it doesn't have to be limited to the computer, that it's connected to a 4K device. And then it's going to take that 4K material and downscale it to 1080p resolution, or the resolution that our displays will ultimately understand. So if if I'm working, like if I'm using Netflix and I'm getting 4K material, Netflix will see that will believe, I should say, that my display is 4K capable of. It will send that 4K material through. It will ultimately get downscaled to what my display understands. So there's two ways to do this. Okay, there might be others, but I think these are the most effective. If you don't have a receiver, if you're going straight from your computer to your display, it'll be PC to the downscaler to the 1080p display. If you have a full receiver with surround sound setup and the whole thing, then you're looking at PC to the receiver to the scaler or the downscaler, and then to the 1080p display. So those are the two models. Now, as far as products to do this, I have two recommendations. So this is it's a product by Easycoolav. The name's a bit of a mouthful. It's the 4K 60 HDMI splitter 1x2 or 1x2. What it does is it takes a 4K signal and sends it to. It's actually a splitter. I mean, it's a downscaler and a splitter. Okay, so what it does is the source material goes into this first HDMI connection, and then at the other side there's two HDMI outputs, and you can choose. There's a little dip switch here, and you choose whether it's going to output in full 4K resolution or it's going to downscale it to 1080p, so something that our displays will understand. But from the point of view of the peripheral connected to this, so let's say the PC, okay, it's going to detect it as a 4K device. Now there is more functionality here, okay. There is a switch, okay, that you can choose how this is detected. So, it could be detected as a 4K device that's split. It could be detected as a 1080p device that gets split, or you could customize it. Okay, maybe there's another solution that you want this to be recognized as, and they have special software for doing that. So key benefits of this, it works completely with Dolby Atmos and DTS:X. So if any signals that flow through this will not have that content stripped. I mentioned that this could be customized. Well, it has software support. So when you run a program, you can you could program the firmware that you could tell it, what it's connected to, what you want how you want this display to be recognized. My experience, provided you don't have to do all that, it's very easy to set up. An extra feature that I think is unique to this device, there is a protective measure, okay, in content these days called HDCP. And there are bloggers out there or video bloggers that they need to take protected material and copy it, so that they could put it in their videos and so on. And they struggle with HDCP. So what this does is when content flows through this device, it will strip that HDCP so that they can copy what's necessary for those blogging purposes. I suppose it could be used for other things too, but we won't be entertaining that in this program. Now, another big feature is the price. $30 US. I think that's I think that's affordable. What I like about it overall, I thought that the downscaling was excellent. Okay, when it came to taking 4K source material and downscaling it to 1080p, I think the results look really good. There's no latency as far as I can tell. It supports YCbCr 444, so I should explain what this is. In your graphics card settings, you could choose how it communicates to your display. So you could choose RGB, RGB full, YCbCr 420, 444, 422. These are all different methods for communicating, what's displayed to your monitor or to your projector. The reason why YCB CR444 is important is because it's uncompressed. Okay, and when it's uncompressed, it looks better. Okay, now this is important when dealing with products like Netflix, because what I found is that on one display it looks okay, in another display when I was using RGB, it didn't look right at all. It looked too dark. I had to use YCB CR444 for both my video games to look good and for Netflix and other streaming services to look good as well. So that's why, and the other benefit of YCB CR444 is because it's uncompressed, when you're using your computer, if you use a compressed system, the text and the background can look a bit mixed. It's not as crisp as it should be. So when you're dealing with YCB CR444, it overcomes that completely. So I'm just highlighting that's an important feature. Now, the other thing that this does, okay, but there's a very big caveat here, is it will accept 4K HDR content. So when I'm talking about HDR, I mean HDR and HDR10. It will handle Dolby Vision, but it will not strip it. Okay, so but here's the thing. Even with standard HDR and HDR10, when it does strip it, so it takes that HDR and 4K source material, downscales to 1080p, it doesn't do it well. Okay, so it's not a useful, in my opinion, it's not a useful feature, because that high dynamic range color space, once it's stripped and it appears on your 1080 device, it looks horrible. So my advice is don't even entertain that as a feature with this particular unit. Now, some things to be aware of. Okay, some caveats. I already mentioned about the high dynamic range. If you want to do fancy things, okay, so let's say you need to program the firmware so it works with so it's recognized as a certain type of display. They have software to do this, okay, and the software isn't hard to use. It's just that it's all in Chinese, and I don't speak Chinese, and so they have a manual that points on what to click, and they actually have supportive videos to show, click here, click here, click here. But it would be so much easier if everything was, in more than one language other than Chinese, so that it was easier to use right out of the box. The other thing is, it is a splitter, and it could be a bit finicky. So once in a while, I'd have to unplug and plug things back in to get things to work again. Something to be very clear on, it's unpredictable, okay? This is an HDMI splitter, right? I do not know what would happen if you took an HDMI to DisplayPort converter or HDMI to another format converter and plugged it in with this. I have no idea how it would behave. So my advice is the only devices you should plug into this are displays intended for HDMI. You can experiment, okay? There's no harm in experimenting, but again, I'd stick with HDMI with this. One other thing, I'm thinking it's a problem that's limited to me, is I found that with this unit, one of my two display monitors was unreliable. So it's a splitter, okay? So when I'm talking about unreliable, one display would work, the second display would work and then shut off and go back on. One of my displays was unreliable. Thing is, if you go, I got this through Amazon, and the other reviewers did not comment on reliability issues, so it could be limited to me, but I'm giving you a heads up. Now the second unit, okay, this is something that I have a photograph for because it's something that I'm actively using right now. It's the Gofanco Prophecy 4K HDR splitter. All right, it's similar to the Easycoolav device I showed earlier. It takes 4K HDMI content and splits it to two separate outputs. Again, it's EDID. All right, so it's recognized as a 4K device, with all the HDR functionality. And again, it will take 4K material and downscale it to 1080p as needed. Other benefits, Dolby Atmos, DTS:X, they're fully maintained, so you don't lose any of that information as it goes through the scaler. What I like is all the configurations are done through dip switch. There's no software to go through different settings. It's all handled through external dip switches. I found that it was very easy to set up. From a pricing point of view, $55 US. It's a bit more than the Easycoolav, but it does have some extras here and there. So I'm going to go through some of the results. So what I like about the unit, the scaling results were very much the same as the Easycoolav. So the quality was good, no latency. It also supported YCB CR444, so you get that uncompressed image transfer, which is very important, especially when working with a computer and Netflix and video games. The firmware can get updated. Okay, so that's actually I experienced that while I owned the device, so it will change with the times. I do like the build quality. In fact, both the Easycoolav and the Gofanco have great build quality. What I liked about the Gofanco unit, which might be why it's a little more money than the Easycoolav, is that it has an external power supply as well, whereas the Easycoolav is connected from a USB. You have to find a USB connector somewhere. So that was a convenience. The other plus, the reason why I'm using the Gofanco on my machines is because it reliably works with all my displays. So that's a big plus. Now, some caveats. It will not strip HDR, like it will not strip high dynamic range color spaces the way the Easycoolav can. But again, I was not happy with the HDR stripping from the Easycoolav, so it's not in my opinion, it's not an important feature. It will not strip HDCP like the Easycoolav. So that's a unique feature that the Easycoolav has that the Gofanco does not. But I have no need to do that, but just for people that do, just to be aware of it. And again, this is the Gofanco unit is only for HDMI. I do not know how it would deal with an HDMI to display port or other type of connector conversions. So which would I ultimately choose? Well, it depends on the application. So the Easycoolav, it has a lot more customization, including HDCP stripping. So if you need that type of you have that advanced use case. The monitor, like if you need to split this between two different computer monitors or displays, your success may vary. I don't know. The reviews I saw on Amazon, everyone was happy. My situation may be unique. Yours will probably be okay, but that was just my experience. And again, it requires a dedicated USB port to power it. Unless you have a USB port nearby, you're going to have to buy an external power supply or a USB power supply somewhere. In the case of the Gofanco, it doesn't have as many features as the Easycoolav, but I did find it easier to configure. Okay, that's for sure. I like the build quality a bit better, okay, and it's a big plus, at least for me, that it has its own power supply, and it does work with all my monitors. Okay, so that's these are all good things. Now, I highlighted an additional benefit, a byproduct of this. Okay, so you now know how to take 4K content and downscale it to a 1080p display. But there's another benefit, in particular with this hardware. So what I do is I have, as you can see, I've got a projector and I've got monitors, I've got a receiver, I've got the whole kit and caboodle down here. Now what I like to do is when I'm working, I'll have the news in the background, be it CNN or music or whatever I have going on. And I really like to do it through my PC because it sounds better. I have a dedicated sound card, and in this case I have a Sound Blaster AE5, and it just sounds much better than any other source I could use. The thing is, and also the other thing is I like to watch the display if my son is using virtual reality. I like to know what's going on, you know, making sure everything's appropriate and so on. The thing is, in the case of a projector, it's very wasteful to do that kind of thing with a projector because the projector bulbs are expensive. They could be in the hundreds of dollars each, and they have a limited bulb life. I mean, you know, they last a bit longer now, but a really good projector could be maybe 4,000 hours or so of bulb life, unless you're using like a laser projector, but most can't afford those, you know, or if they're like me, they can't afford those. But anyway, so the solution is, and what I'm doing with the Gofanco, and you could do that with the Easycoolav, is it's an HDMI splitter. And what I do is I have one of the outputs going to the projector, and I have the other output going to a regular monitor. So when I'm doing these passive things, I just use the monitor. It's near my desk. You know, I'm able to watch the news or hear the news, whatever's going on, or watch my son playing virtual reality, and I'm not wasting bulb life. And then when I'm really ready to use the projector, like, you know, testing video games or whatever is necessary for a projector, here we go. I have it all hooked up and ready to go. So this in itself makes it a worthwhile purchase, especially if you own a projector. So far, so good in building our PC media center. So now we know how to downscale, I should say, 4K content to 1080p. Okay, but you need a good base. I mean, PC is fantastic. It's great for sourcing the content, but you're going to need a way to hear that Dolby Atmos and DTSX, that Dolby Atmos and DTSX surround sound mixes and so on. So I'm going to share my experience in our next episode by giving you a full-on review of the Anko TX NR595 surround sound receiver. I'm going to share some tips and tricks as well for getting the best results. So thank you for watching. We're going to talk again soon.